We're continuing our special day of Founders Day programming with a panel discussion entitled This Land is My Land, Creating Generational Wealth Through Property Ownership. Brought to you by Bank of America and moderated by Reality Check host Charles Ellison.
This land is your land. We're going to talk about Black land and home ownership and generational wealth, or the transfer of that wealth, how we create opportunities for that. And we know Dr. Lomax was all about that. That's how Dr. Lomax, that was his calling. That was the impetus, that was the genesis for what we have here today. That land ownership strategy was the genesis for what we have today here at WURD. First, I do want to give a shout out, a word of thanks to our sponsor, who made this conversation possible, who's allowing us or giving us the ability to bring this on air, to bring this to life, and that's Bank of America. Thanks so much for making this possible. This land is your land. Let me go ahead and introduce our star-studded panel. We have a star-studded panel today. We have an illustrious panel of experts who are going to give us some wonderful insights. I've got some questions ready about Black land and home ownership, particularly what that means for a place, a struggle space like Philadelphia. Obviously, that struggle over space is very prominent. It's not even just a struggle, it's a war. We're engaged in a war over space. It's very prominent, very prevalent here in Philadelphia. So we're going to talk about that and talk about strategies and how we move forward, how we progress in that struggle. So let me go ahead and introduce, I'm going to go ahead and start from to my far right. I'm going to start to the far right. I'm going to introduce brother, the legendary Kenny Gamble, legendary music producer. You all know him. You know the Gamble. You do know the Gamble. Also real estate professional, master, yoga extraordinaire. So he's been very involved in the real estate space industry here in Philadelphia for quite some time, so definitely want to get his insights. I appreciate his presence here today. Also, to his left is Charles Lomax. Charles Lomax, the Lomax family, also chairman, CEO of Lomax Real Estate Partners, LP. Also joining us, been involved in that real estate, that space game for quite some time, so looking forward to that. Always love to see Charles, and I love sharing that great name. Ashanti Martin, to his left, is the newly minted general manager of WURD Radio. Also involved in that Black land reclamation movement for quite some time, so she's going to offer some insights with respect to that. There is a Black land reclamation movement. It's in full steam, so she's going to talk to us about some of that history. Also, Tayyib Smith. Love seeing Tayyib Smith. Always highly engaged on social media, on Twitter, but he is, more importantly, principal, also chief strategist for Smith & Roller, and chief strategist for the Growth Collective. Also involved, been paying very close attention to what's been transpiring, what's been unfolding in this real estate space. Also very heavily involved in the innovation industry as well. There's a burgeoning innovation technology industry here in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a hub for that. That obviously has impacts. Also, a lot to do with what's happening in terms of our land, in terms of home ownership. So let's go ahead and get the conversation started, if you will. So once again, we're live on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, also wordradio.com, Word TV, and Word app. Ashanti, I'm going to go to you first, and how we talk about Black land and home ownership. I want to start with you, Ashanti, but I want to get answers from everyone on the panel, but I'll start with you first. What does that look like now, especially when we think about what it looked like before, years ago, especially post-Civil War, Reconstruction, post-Civil rights, and now today? What does that look like now compared to back then? Go ahead, Ashanti.
Thank you, Charles. Well, first, I just want to say, and I'm sure many people who are listening and many people who are in the audience are aware, in addition to Dr. Lomax's commitment to own the buildings and the land here in Philadelphia where he did business, later in life he reclaimed 800 acres in Virginia of land that his family had been enslaved upon. So it's stories like this that truly motivated me. I would say I was first inspired to get into this movement when I learned that George Floyd's ancestor, his great-great-grandfather, Hillary Thomas Stewart, had also formerly enslaved and had acquired 500 acres of land in North Carolina, upon which he was a farmer and had businesses, and his family lived there, through a series of actions, including fraud and changing of laws in the locality where he lived. He lost all of that land over time to white farmers. I also learned before then that my family, who formerly enslaved and upon freedom was granted 300 acres of land and later about 150 acres of land. So it really made me think about the difference between what I've been able to achieve sitting here today and, how George Floyd's life ended and what connection land and wealth had to that. So I will add that over history, it is believed that the theft of black land is one of the main drivers of the generational wealth gap, because as we know, land ownership is one of the main drivers of family wealth and generational wealth. So I think it's important to understand that that wealth gap wasn't only driven by things that we were denied, such as loans, mortgages, opportunities. It's driven by things that we once had and were stolen and were taken. So I think that's important to realize, because in many ways it's still happening today. And as the reparations movement gains steam in this country, once I learned about the extent of black land theft over time, I really started thinking, okay, we can talk about reparations, and it's not really a debate to me. I believe we are owed. But before you give us what is owed, how about you give us what was taken?
Mr. Gamble, what's that evolution been like as you've watched it, as you've witnessed it over the years? Black land, black home ownership, black involvement in the real estate space then and now. How did it evolve for you?
Testing, 1, 2. Good morning, everybody. How y'all feel? I feel good. Like James Brown. I knew that I would, right? Well, it's very good to be here with you today. And I have my wife with me, Sister Fatima. She's over there. Where'd she go? There she is. Because she's the real estate lady and encouraged our family all the time about the importance of owning real estate and developing real estate. My thought with this whole thing, and believe it or not, I'm getting old, so my mind drifts a little bit every now and then. That's all right? Okay, thank you. It seems like when we grew up in South Philly, nobody even knew about owning real estate. Nobody even told us anything about owning real estate. We were like Sam Sobel. He would come by there and pick up the rent. For me and my brothers and my mother, you had a lot of groups of people that used to come around and knock on the door. You'd have the rent man coming, you'd have the insurance man, you have all these different people, $5 to this one, $3 to that one, but that's the kind of money they was dealing with back then. We as a people, African people, you don't know unless somebody teach you. And we have not had the privilege of learning what the value of real estate can do to not only a people, but to a nation. And we see right now that these wars that they are fighting all over this world is because of land. And land sounds like a big word, but it's not the land so much, but what is in the land? Is it gold in the land? Is it oil in the land? What's in the land? So here we are in South Philly. Bubby's from South Philly. I'm from South Philly. A lot of other people here from South Philly. We were what was in the land in South Philly. Our people who are now, boy, we're in a very interesting part of the development of us as a people. They're moving us out of that land. So I think that my thought goes back, what's your name again, brother?
Charles
Yeah.
Ellison, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. The question that he asked me, it eludes me just a little bit right now, but I think the goal and objective is that who's going to tell the people? Who's going to tell people that you can own your own land? You can own your own property. You can own these things yourself. And it's not that far away from from our hands. Our hands, we have our hands right on it now. And over the last, I would say the last 30, 40 years, and someone like Dr. Lomax comes along, and he's got Charles and Bennett and Thomas and a whole bunch of information that he could pass on to us. Dr. Ed Robinson, people, these are the people that have passed my life, is that would encourage us to own the land. Own the land. And so you had these two forces, one trying to keep the secret from us, and one trying to bring the secret to us.
Let me jump in here too, Mr. Gemmell. Let me ask Charles about that too, that education process, that learning curve, what that's been like, especially you witnessing what your father did, how it transformed your family, how it transformed and shaped the city, really, right? What has that, talk about that educational process and that evolution of black land, real estate involvement, home ownership back then and now. What that's been like, what that educational process has been like.
So it's interesting. First of all, I'm sitting next to sort of the real estate professor. Kenny was more than just a musical visionary. He was a community visionary, and what he's done, I mean, I feel so blessed to know people like Kenny. He mentioned Dr. Robinson, my father. These are folks who they were sort of nonconformist. And what they did is one of the things they did that was so amazing is they really reinforced the value of self and self-worth and black humanity. And they demonstrated it through action, not just talk. And so, as it relates to real estate, my father didn't do stocks. He was a land guy. He found real estate, invested early on, and I think part of it came from his parents, who were from rural Virginia, who were about land. I mean, they owned land. My great-grandfather, Fleming, had 85 acres down in Virginia that he left to his kids. I mean, we still have that land. And I think that one of the things that's so critically important is that we need to understand as a community what we have. One of the most fundamental things in real estate is site control. And we have site control now. We just have to understand how to manage it and use it as a way to sort of create real wealth and institutionalize that wealth for ourselves and our communities. And that's, I've witnessed that happen with my father, with Kenny, and with other folks. So, that's sort of the history.
Thank you. And Tayyib, realizing what we have, right? And in the context of all these crises that we're faced with today, right? Like, how important is this ownership imperative? How critical is it?
If you don't own anything, particularly in this country, you are on the menu, right? And I think for many people, if you don't own anything, you're on the menu, right? And if you don't have ownership in the United States, which from inception has always been a business, you are at the behest of those who do own. And I think for people like myself who grew up in an age when there was more funding for public housing and concepts of affordable housing, some of us naively believed that that would always be there. But contemporary capitalism does not have any empathy or any space for us to thrive. And I think most of the programs that are being developed for affordable housing through all kinds of tax credits or public policy are giving us trickle-down displacement. It's not giving us the ability to have dominion and control over our futures. So if you don't have ownership, you don't have political voice. And I think there's a new generation of people who understand that, but I think we have to have an intergenerational conversation about concepts of site control. Who actually is the owner and who are they leaving that to? Because never in my lifetime have I seen so many people potentially in peril for not having control over land or ownership. If you look all over the city, there's almost 15,000 units that are going to expire as affordable housing. And in an age now where we're dealing with climate refugees, there are spaces where people have felt comfortable for generations that now people are going to have to look for new places to live. And we are not thought of as a community that is invested in or has the opportunity to thrive. So not just has much of our land been stolen, but we never got a Homestead Act. We didn't get free land. We didn't get free land with programs to teach people how to benefit from that land. So I think never has it been more important for us to have dominion over our social, political, and cultural future.
Ashanti, there's this myth of merit, and hard work, the American mythology of merit and hard work, which breeds success, like automatic success. But what we're finding out is that it's really about ownership and it's about wealth transfer. So talk about that. Like, we've missed out on that. We're under this assumption that, you just have to work hard. But then in the meantime, we have other groups that are predominant over us. They've been doing the wealth transfer game all along. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we really saw, like with the example, whether it's through Brother Kenny Gamble or is through the Lomax family, and other instances that we're familiar with that we've seen that they were creating a paradigm for wealth transfer. Talk about that, about wealth transfer, why this is also about like that general concept of wealth transfer, that's what we have to start building, encouraging, growing in Black communities.
Yeah, I honestly think that the narrative that we tell ourselves as individuals and as a community is so fundamental to all of this, because I think that, things like land ownership, wealth ownership, real estate can feel out of reach if you don't know that, we did once have that, we were once stewards of vast swaths of land. I think that younger folks kind of grow up. I grew up in the 1980s where, I grew up in the middle of the war on drugs. The Reagan administration was defunding everything. So you just had this picture, and divorced from that history of knowing, what your ancestors did, you have this picture that we're just not able, we don't have the chops. But truly, we have the chops, and we had the chops, and those opportunities were taken away. So I think that narrative and history, which we know, People are fighting very hard to keep us from that history. So really understanding the history of stolen land, I think, is key for a lot of folks to, just kind of tell ourselves that this is not something we can't do. This is something we've been doing. I think it's important to state that, from 1914, there were 1 million black farmers in America. And today, I want to say there are under 10,000. Now, of course, there are fewer white farmers as well, but the decline in the number of black farmers has outpaced the decline in white farmers by 2.5 times. So, and I also want to talk about what was lost, because we can talk about what you gain through land ownership, and the transfer of wealth is absolutely one of those things. To me, it's also important to talk about what we've lost. We lost a lot of resorts. So we lost leisure. We lost the opportunity to have leisure. We lost the opportunity to create community. We lost the space and the land. A lot of times when farmland was stolen, families in the South were driven out. So that was part of the Great Migration, pushing people north. And so some of the communities that we see here in Philadelphia and other large cities that are so plagued, it really is directly related to the loss of that land and space. We lost access to land that we could steward responsibly, right? So a lot of times we had land, it was at one point undesirable, right? So that was the land that we received as part of segregation, but as environmental technology evolved, white people found ways to make it more hospitable to things like tourism, to extracting resources from the land, right? So a lot of us were pushed off of land because there was oil or gas or water or minerals. A lot of the land that was taken was driven by extracting from it and creating environmental problems that are still plaguing us. And finally, I just want to say also, getting back to that narrative of creating pride once we kind of know our history. The spirit of people like Dr. Lomax, I do truly believe that his acquisition of land that his family was previously enslaved on was an act of defiance. There are many people throughout history who lost their land because they were being defiant. Isaac Simmons was a farmer, and in 1944, he was lynched because he hired a lawyer and dared to challenge the white people who were buying his crops and trying to underpay him. So the result was he was lynched and family driven out of town. Anthony Crawford in South Carolina in 1916, same thing happened with him. So a lot of the violence also that we experienced was driven by the resentment of our success as landowners. So that's something I think that that children today and young folks today need to understand. This is not new for us. We have transferred wealth, and we can do it again.
Mr. Gamble, how much of that, the study of that history is important. That's the first essential step towards that level of ownership and empowerment that we're on a quest for. Let's get into how much of that wealth transfer do you feel like, or do you see we're missing out on? And then I want to get a little bit into sort of like, well, what are the steps? What are the first steps or additional steps we need to take getting on that path to ownership?
Well, from my observance and listening to the conversation that we're going through is that I still say that you have to have someone to teach you about land. And what are you going to do with that land when you get it? And if you can figure that out in the beginning, when we were working, because we were living, my wife and I, my kids, and we were living in this so-called suburbs. That's where the goal and objective of most people are, whether you be African American, whether you be Puerto Rican, or whatever the case might be. Everybody's trying to get to the suburbs. And so they want to live on the main line or whatever, okay? That's the goal and objective of most people. And we were like that too. I was like that too until I started listening to a guy named Malcolm X and when I started listening to Elijah Muhammad, and I started listening and reading about Marcus Garvey, and I started reading about our people. I'm talking about an enlightened people who says, listen, you can have all of that, but do not forget your people. You cannot forget your people. So if you're just going to move away from where the issue really is, and so Dr. Lomax, he's a perfect example. He can have it all. You just don't have to have a little piece of the whole thing. But if you create it yourself, because really, people that we're dealing with, they don't even want to be buried next to us. That's pretty deep to don't want to be buried next to a person. Mm-hmm. And you don't know the person. You don't even know them. And they putting you in a grave and you said, wait a minute, I was looking at the story on TV the other night about Emmett Till. It's unbelievable what's been taught to a people, and that's why I say you got to teach us, got to be taught. Now we're honored and blessed to be even in the presence of that kind of knowledge that a Dr. Lomax and Sam Evans and God knows, I can't even think of, my brain is moving so fast, I can't even get it out, what I want to tell you. But we're here because of Dr. Lomax. We're here because Dr. Lomax, he thought that much of us to be able to invest in some vehicle that he would use, which is WURD radio.
That's right.
To teach us about what do you use land for.
Right, how you get it and what you use it for.
What do you use it for? The more you have, the better it is? No, because you got to take care of land.
That's right.
You got to take care of, it's what is the saying the other day, somebody was reinforcing this with me. If you take care of the earth will take care of you.
We'll take care of, yes sir.
If you fight the earth is going to fight you. And you don't want no opponent like the earth, because the earth is in charge of everything.
It's fighting us now, in fact.
It's fighting us right now.
Mr. Gamble, hold on. I want to take real quick, Tayyib, you wanted to jump in and mention something.
In addition to having spaces where people can be taught, I think we need to instill a spirit of curiosity. So I used to be in the music business, and you can't be in the music business in Philadelphia and not hear of Mr. Gamble, right? And I think there were few people who controlled as much publishing as Gamble and Huff in their heyday. I would say, as a proud Philadelphian, competitive with the city of Detroit in terms of Motown. Like, I'm a bigger fan of Philadelphia International than I am of Motown, right? But I learned about the Lomax family because I asked my good friend Donna Frisbee Greenwood, where were the black foundations? And she said, look up the Lomax family. Right. And I found an interview with Walter Lomax on an old reel player. That's real. That's like a technology that doesn't even exist.
Right.
And I almost teared up when I found out about the property he bought in Virginia, because I had never heard of anything like that.
Right.
Right. And I felt angry as a man in my late 30s at that time that no one had ever told me there was a black man who was so successful he was able to buy the land of the people who enslaved his grandmother, great-grandmother, right? So I believe that every child in the city of Philadelphia should understand that type of history, whether it's knowing Mr. Gamble's transformative work he did as a business owner in the music business and then evolving into real estate, or having an understanding of Dr. Lomax and 4 other partners winning the first RFP to create an HMO in the state of Pennsylvania. So most of our young people only know about, sports or entertainment, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at wealth in the world, the celebrity class has very little control over wealth or the dominion of our families, right? And I think even going back historically, when we were talking about lynching, Ida B. Wells wrote about, it wasn't people who were flirting with the opposite race who actually got lynched. It was business owners. It was people who had the dominion to invest in churches. It was people who could hire buses so that people could afford to go somewhere and march. It was people who had printing presses or owned business who said, you can't speak to me that way. Those were the first people who got lynched. And there were things like the Chicago Defender that were black-owned media, just like WURD, that taught people where the opportunities were up north so that we could even have a great migration. So it's very important that we instill curiosity and a desire to learn, because you can't always teach people if they're not ready to learn. So the next generation or future generations have to have an understanding about the continued curiosity and the wins that we've already accomplished, because most of them are covered up by white lies.
That's right. That's right. This is WURD Radio 96.1 FM. 900 AM Philadelphia, also wordradio.com, on air, online, WURD TV, WURD app as well. Charles, is there a model? Is there a framework? Like, is there, okay, so we know we have to learn. We got to study the history. And as Mr. Gamble was saying, someone has to teach us, right? So your father, Dr. Lomax, created this vehicle to teach us. Is there like I don't know, is it like a 3, 4, 5-step model or framework for achieving this level, something, the fundamentals of like real estate or land ownership, something that a framework, some kind of paradigm or model that black folks can abide by. We like our steps, those digestible bites, or like, sort of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is what you do. Does that model exist, or is it a lot more complicated than that? Of course it is, but I want to get your thoughts on that.
It's very complicated.
Right.
But the thing that's amazing, the thing that I'm starting to see is that Philadelphia, and I said this earlier, it's not New York, it's not San Francisco, it's not DC. We have, and I'm a glass half full guy, we have an opportunity to create a affordable home ownership model, which I think is critically important. Okay. That could be a model, a national model. But it's going to take everybody. It's going to take the public sector. It's going to take the private sector. It's going to take the philanthropic sector. It's going to take the community. Everybody has to be at that table to have this discussion, start to put together the tools and resources to figure out how to address this issue. And I think that, where it starts with the community. We got to talk, but everybody has to talk. One of the most amazing things is when I go someplace to talk about a development opportunity, it takes me 4 meetings before people sit across the table and see each other as people and human beings. And so I think that we really have to work towards seeing the humanity in each other so that we can start to have conversations that aren't defensive, that aren't offensive, that aren't, I was telling a large group of very, very, very successful institutional developers, what's lacking in a lot of ways is something I've started calling institutional empathy. Because you can't just go into a community, you can't just do stuff around a community without having a conversation and where everybody sees each other as real people and human beings. And we've been so dehumanized as a community that we've, in a lot of ways, we've dehumanized ourselves. We got to get past that. We got to learn to sort of appreciate each other. One of the beautiful things that I've witnessed from my father, from Mr. Gamble, from Ed Robinson, my mother, my family, is a really deep down, profound love for community. And I think that's what's so important. That's where I think is the fundamental beginning of that's step one.
Yeah.
That's step one.
Go ahead, Tayyib.
Everyone's trying to tell you to put your mic up.
Oh, put my mic up?
Oh, put your mic. I see what
sorry.
you're saying. Yeah. Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, appreciate that, Tayyib.
bad.
Yeah. Make sure the mics are up as well. Oh, Mr. Gamble, you wanted to?
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with Charles, because most of what we do as a community, what's been taught to us, is to get away from your people. Get away from them because you got to get away. You got to move so far away. And you have a small portion of us that think like that. But most African American, most people, period, they cannot afford. They got champagne ideas and they got wine money or beer money. And so the bottom line of some of this here is that it's a money game. If you have money, what is the best place to put your money? First of all, in my mind, I think the best place to put your money, if you have any excess money, you put that in land. You put it in land, and you use that land to bring your neighbors, if you can. Some of your people you can't train them, and that's the bottom line. And the reason why you can't train our people, I have a hard time even training myself. I just have to stick with it and keep people around us. Like education. Education is number one. That's the whole thing. If you have a community of educated people, you're going to get a different result than what you got today, where you got people shooting in the streets, and they shooting not just the guns at like Christmas time. They got machine guns that they're teaching the kids today. So you got to look at that and say, how do we raise ourselves out of that mindset that's being taught to us every day? Every time you turn around, you got somebody being killed or a group of people being killed. You don't even want to go to the movies no more. You don't want to. Me and my daughter, we wrote a song the other day called "Bad News." Tell me something good for a change, because the bottom line of it is, if you turn the radio on or you turn TV on, it's going to tell you some bad news that's going on. Okay. And so here you got WURD, Dr. Lomax, took the chance. He put his money in it. And the community supported. Look at all these people here. These are babies of WURD. I was meeting Sarah's children, and I see, well, I was so-and-so when you was around. I mean, look, you gotta give it time. You gotta say, how long does one of these trees take? Yeah. That's 100 feet tall. How long did it take for this tree to grow this long and to be strong enough? Did anybody take care of that tree? And that's what our community needs. Our community needs strong people who know that they're not gonna live forever, but you gotta be able to take that tree, these human beings, these young people who are interested, and you gotta make it look good to them instead of, it's your habits. And our community has some good habits and some bad habits. So I think that Dr. Lomax is a perfect example. And
of the good habit.
Yeah, he's a good habit. I mean, you look at it, and in fact, I didn't even know what his name was, his middle name, you know. Some of us, no, I just found out a few years ago. Pleasant. Yeah, I said, that's a great name for Dr. Lomax.
That's a great middle name.
Because he's a pleasant man, you know what I mean? And most of us, I mean, don't even have middle names.
Right,
you know?
right.
I used to ask my mother, I said, well, why's Charles got a middle name and I don't have a middle name?
Let me, real quick, Mr. Gamble, excuse me. Okay, Ashanti and I want to go to Tayyib because I know you want to make a point. The big challenge here, and I'm going to throw this question out here to everyone, and maybe Tayyib, you're thinking about it, but how do you get into this game? How do we accelerate black land ownership, black home ownership without leaving masses of people behind, right? Because at the end of the day, area median income in Philadelphia is $49,000. It's even lower for most black people in Philadelphia. It's 60% nationwide, 60% of black people rent. Some people are going to say, some folks, critics will counter, they'll say, hey, listen, this is a great goal, but can everyone get into it? You know, or how do we do it in such a way where it's just not a few of us escaping, but we're creating a conduit or a channel where all of us can escape these really difficult circumstances that we find ourselves in, like what you just described, Mr. Gamble. How do we reconcile that? How do we find that balance? I'll start with you, Ashanti, on that question.
So I'm very obsessed with history, just as an enthusiast. And speaking, Mr. Gamble spoke about education. I mean, I will say that I feel thoroughly miseducated by this educational system. Like I said, I went to school during a time where they were sort of trying to reintegrate the schools, because from 1955 to 1970s, 80s, segregation, de facto segregation had already taken place, and we're back there again. But so I'm very obsessed with history. I can speak to that, and I would speak to the practical. I think the practical and future matters. Other panelists are much more equipped to answer, but I think they're related. And the reason is that as many Black families around this country learn more about the land that they were once connected to, the land that their ancestors once owned, a lot of this has to do with proof, right? Legal proof, witness proof. So, there's a lot of work there that reflects all the things that you have to know today as someone who is getting into real estate and land. Understanding how to research things like titles, deed records, using available census data, birth records, death records, where your ancestors lived. I mean, there are a lot of different places, both free and paid, that you can find. And to me, one of the most important ones is oral history. So I'm very much an advocate of speaking to the eldest in your family, your community, because people who might actually have lived on the land and witnessed it. And why is that so important? Because across the South especially, courthouses and government buildings were burned and destroyed intentionally to obfuscate the truth of land ownership. So even today, all these things is, documentation, keep your records. There are issues now with tangled title and down in the South, heirs property, where you inherit land, but you don't necessarily have the legal documentation, and then it's taken from you very easily by real estate developers. So I would say looking to history to think about the best actions now. How do you make sure that your future generations know about the land ownership and doing what you can to prevent it from being taken?
Yeah, the more you know. Tayyib?
So something Mr. Gamble said earlier reminded me of a cliche I used to hear in real estate that really offended me and still does. And it's an old saying that people say, when there's blood on the streets, buy land. And it's actually from the Napoleonic era, Civil War. That when there's bloodshed, you can buy land at a cheap price. Right? And I think of that as an analogy for Black communities all over the country, because those who have the most means get up out of Dodge and move away. Right? So then we leave our poorest and most disenfranchised without the fabric of community. And what's happening right now in Philadelphia is that, with good reason, because of schools, like I hear you say on your show all the time, only 30% of third graders read on grade level. We build prisons off of the estimates of fourth graders, right? So there's still institutional white supremacy that does not have a plan for us to thrive, right? But when you talked about oral history, it reminded me, my mother used to tell me all the time that what brought us to Philadelphia is because my great-grandfather's parents were killed for their land in South Carolina, right? So my family not only moved up from South Carolina to South Philadelphia, but eventually ended up on Wood Street, right behind us, when this was considered Skid Row, before this building was built by a Black architect, Julian Abel. Right? So to your earlier point, we have always had agency, we've always had talent, but so few of our youth have an understanding of that history. And we have to be imaginative, and we have to be demanding about public policy, investment, because we have a 10x differential in Black household wealth to white household wealth. So our money doesn't go as long in these black neighborhoods where there's violence, because other people are moving in from suburbs and they have enough intergenerational equity and capital to buy at a more competitive rate than we do. So there is no future with us thriving in the United States without some type of collaborative mindset and ideology, from the richest to the poorest. And I think there's been a generation of business people who actually believed through the concept of black capitalism that they could outrun white supremacy. And that's not going to happen, right? If we don't think about how to lift up others who don't have our level of agency or benefit, we all are going to be in a position of peril. So everyone has to reach back and reach ahead to have a collaborative mindset in regards to how we have a positive impact and a collective impact in our best interest.
Yeah, Charles, if you want to speak to that too. And then, on that larger question of, okay, well, once we get the land, like, how do we protect it? How do we keep it?
Organization. I mean, it's interesting because we have land. We just have to understand its value. But what we don't have, which Kenny spoke to, is we don't really have. There's not a book or a thing that's going to tell us, and no one's going to tell us how to sort of take a piece of real estate and create real value out of it. I think that we have to come together. I mean, this is sort of the beginning of that sort of conversation, but we have to have conversations with institutions. We have to have conversations with capital sources. We have to have conversations with
Charles, raise your mic.
We have to have conversations with community. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, that's sorry, brother.
And that is where you're going to start to put together the tools to figure out how to hold on and capitalize off of these real estate resources that are within our communities. We have, in a lot of ways, we have site control. We are in these communities. I think that organizational capacity is critically important, which will give us the wherewithal to address gentrification, to address policies that have historically been designed to disenfranchise black folks. But here's the thing: it's not this. And I was talking to my mom about this earlier. This stuff is hard. It's not easy. It's not like It's not like it's easy to develop something. It's not easy to buy land. It's not. I mean, and I don't know if it's deliberately complicated, but it's a very, very complicated process. Just transferring a piece of real estate. We have to. I just think it's important for us to come together as a community to work because there's so much pushback to that. There's pushback to us getting together. There's pushback to us having these kind of conversations. There's pushback to getting the community together. So to say, we don't want this here. We want that. There's pushback. There's pushback with how people appraise land. There's this. The problem that we're having as a country is that, the inbred inequity that's been bred into the DNA of this country, it hurts everybody. It hurts black folks, it hurts investors, it hurts everybody. And so we got to get past that so that we can
I did want to ask you about that too. You mentioned appraisers. One of the things that's fascinated me about the appraisal industry, well, one, it's 95% white, 95% male. I mean, are there any black appraisers? That's one. And the other thing too is that the appraisal industry, I'm real curious about this. The appraisal industry, I thought about it the other day when I saw that example, what happened in Baltimore, right? That was reported in the New York Times. A black family had to completely just transform their house so they could get a better appraisal. But the appraisal associations, they're invisible. It's like it's an invisible industry when you start asking questions about how black homes are appraised.
anytime you transfer a piece of real estate, anytime you go to a bank, there's going to be an appraisal. And you know, what I've learned over time, appraisals are completely subjective. I mean, I want my appraisal to be $500,000. Another guy wants it to be $1 million. And you can get two different appraisers to come up with those numbers based on what you're trying to do. You know, and there's a paradox in real estate. If you're a seller, the price is always too low. If you're a buyer, the price is always too high. And that informs appraisals. Got
it. Oh, go ahead, Tayyib.
So, you know, there are fewer than 600 African-American women architects in the United States, right? That every building you're seeing built needs an external and interior architect. As you mentioned, appraisers, we make up probably less than 5% of the industry. If you're talking about commercial real estate brokers, that's probably less than 5%. All right, so across sectors that are the infrastructure of what develops a city or a suburban or a rural community, we are not in the space, right? But then all of those associations and institutions are working with the state, municipal, and federal government. If we don't change public policy to mandate that we have a more diverse ecosystem of practitioners, we will always be in the wake of other people's best interests.
Well, Mr. Gamble, did you want to, as far as that question was concerned about, well, Tayyib just brought up a wonderful point about our involvement and our participation in those different sectors that are not just the real estate industry itself, but all those
well, I think
various interconnected industries.
From what I'm hearing is that you got to start with the root of the problem. And the root of this problem that we're dealing with, and we got most of the answers, we just don't have all of the action. The thing of it is that you got to work together. You got to have unity as a people, because the bottom line of the whole thing is this. From what I can see, I mean, I might be wrong, but I don't think I'm that too far off the mark here, is that roses grow where the roses go. Tulips, they go where the tulips go. The Spanish people, they live on the north side. The African American people, they live on the east side. You have different kinds of humans that live together. When you move into a neighborhood, and there's nothing wrong with none of this. See, if you take an opinion of something like this and think that somebody trying to do something to you, they already did it already. Yeah, they already, like South Philly. Every morning when I wake up, I look out and I see the house that I was born in, 15th Street, and I say to myself, wow, I can remember when we used to run around the block here. Memories. And that's where I see us, that we don't have memories. And Dr. Lomax, what we're here for today is we're talking about the memory of the founder of this concept with Dr. Lomax. I remember when I first saw the picture of him with Martin Luther King, I said, Doc, you big, man. And Doc, he was beautiful because, you know, he nothing but South Philly. He loved South Philly, but he saw the future. He's seen the future, and that we must keep that alive. We must keep it all alive, and I see you gotta, like Charles said, it's not easy. It's not easy. A lot of people just want it to happen tomorrow, but it's not going to go like that, because life is consistent. Day after day, night after night, year after year, you got to be on the job. You got to take the good times with the bad times. And if you don't, you're going to get hurt. You're going to wind up crying. You're going to wind up doing all kinds of things. Like in the music business, it's almost like real estate too, because there's only a certain amount of songs that they can play in one day. So what we try to do is we got to get at least 2-3 of them songs so that they can hear our music. And so it's all about real estate. It's about ownership. How do you take your product and have it to the point where that people are able to see your part? I mean, this is it. I'm gonna shut up after this. The thing of it is that these young Caucasian people who now live in South Philadelphia, they got pit bulls.
Mm-hmm.
Just about all of them got pit bulls.
Yeah.
Because you know what they know? Black people don't like no pit bulls.
Yeah.
That's what they know.
They know, yeah.
They said we're going to get a pit bull and get me a big black one. and he going to growl. As soon as you walk by him, you say, damn, man, I ain't do nothing to him. You see? So we're in a case where we need to have our own everything.
Right.
Got to have your own swimming pool. Mm-hmm. People didn't want to swim with us. Mm-hmm. They got through lie in the pool because we were in the pool. So I mean, so we're here today to and I'm here today. You know, my wife is with me. She knows all of this. She taught me a lot of stuff. The thing of it is tighten our families up. Tighten up our relationships with each other so that we want to live together. Mm-hmm. That we want to live together. And once we start seeing that, then you'll start to see us own more real estate. You'll see us own more of everything.
Yes, sir.
And that's kind of like the bottom line of it to me is that you got to own your own.
I agree with you. I think you're right.
And
let me real quick to end it while we got a few more minutes.
All right, go ahead,
Ashanti, no, I appreciate you, Mr. Gamble. I appreciate it. I think we need to hear that. And I want to ask real quick, Ashanti, as we're thinking about community organizing, being very intentional and institutional about this. I mean, what are the organizations we need to start paying attention to, or we need to start bolstering up? Institutions within our community organizations, civic organizations, some of what we're talking about, like what Tayyib had mentioned about getting into different sectors. HBCUs come to mind as far as like doing that workforce development, career development, training piece, education piece, right? What do you think of those organizations kind of top of mind that we need to start bolstering and getting involved in?
Well, I can't speak locally to Philadelphia because these organizations are more prominent throughout the South, but there are land loss prevention organizations. Mm-hmm. So Professor Thomas Mitchell, I forget what school he's from, but he's one of the leading scholars on lost land and stolen land. Mm-hmm. And he has an organization called Black Land Loss Prevention Project. There is an organization called the Centers for Heirs Property in South Carolina that specifically deals with coastal South Carolina properties that have been stolen. And there are other regional organizations like that. So that's important for people who are looking into land from, if they had land in the South, or families had land in the South or the Midwest, is there are these organizations helping locally and regionally. Mm-hmm. I would also say, to the point of family and bringing community together, I have found through the process of starting to try to record my own oral histories. When my mom turned 75, I just put my phone on the table in front of her and I said, let's just start talking. And I found out that she, when she was being babysat as a child, A. Philip Randolph used to just come in and out of the house. Like, she was very connected to a lot of civil rights people. And I'm like, you're 75. Why? How am I just finding this out now? Right? But it was having those conversations and creating that connection to your family. And I think through that is how you create connection to community.
We're going to wrap up. I think I feel like there's a part 2 coming with this conversation, especially as it relates to sustainability and climate issues. Because I was just seeing a report that just came out saying that state and county governments should prepare, especially along the East Coast or coastal cities, should prepare for about $100 billion worth of loss in property taxes, because there's going to be so much flooding, it's going to take over so much land. So that climate element, we didn't get a chance to touch on in this conversation, but I'm looking forward to another conversation about, okay, well, now suddenly black home ownership, black land ownership, we come to a realization it's an imperative we go fast in that direction, but how do we manage it in the age of climate crisis? And then how do we do it in a sustainable manner? So I think that that's going to be an important conversation as well. We've been having a This Land is My Land panel, creating generational wealth through property ownership. And that's a conversation that celebrates what Dr. Lomax was doing. This is because of ownership, we now have WURD and we have conversations like this on a regular basis. I want to just thank our panelists. Now, we needed more time for this conversation. Ashanti Martin is general manager. Okay, Ashanti, real quick. Ashanti Martin is general manager of WURD Radio. Tayyib Smith, principal, Smith & Roller, also chief strategist, The Growth Collective. Charles Lomax, chairman, CEO of Lomax Real Estate Partners, LP. Kenny Gamble, of course, longtime music producer, real estate developer. Also, Sarah Lomax Reese, president, CEO of WURD Radio, has a few words before we go to break.
Oh. Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you. Let's see if this will work. Is this on, Troy? Yeah? It doesn't sound like it's on. It's not. Is it on? I don't think it's on.
There we go.
All right, here we go. It's on. Just want to say thank you to our amazing panel, Tayyib Smith, Ashanti Martin, Charles Lomax, Kenny Gamble, for being with us. That was amazing information. Let's give it up.